As an umbrella organization for 60 different Muslim-based organizations in Greater Chicago, CIOGC serves to galvanize the Muslim voice on issues of critical importance to our community. CIOGC, through its member organizations, assumes a greater responsibility in the civic space. We spearheaded participation in the 2020 census through job fairs, workshops, phone banking, and other forms of community outreach. Voter education is an essential responsibility for our members. Through voter registration drives, candidate forums, and now these town hall meetings, we strive to increase an understanding of how our government works and to form you, our members, as voters, your responsibilities to exercise this right to vote. Two important initiatives in the civic engagement area that we are pushing now involved increased participation of members in local elections, and more importantly, to remain engaged with our elected officials after elections, to hold them to those promises they made to us during the campaign. This Congressional Town Hall is a program to address that continued engagement with now our federal elected officials. And at this time, to share the background about this program, I want to introduce and yield the platform to the chair of the Civic Engagement, CIOGC Civic Engagement Committee, Dr. Sabah Khan. Dr. Khan?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. And greetings of peace and blessings to all the people who are attending our program today. I welcome you all to the Congressional Townhall Series hosted by the Council of Islamic Organization of Greater Chicago. My name is Dr. Sabah Khan, and I will be one of the moderators today, along with Mr. Abdullah Mitchell, who so eloquently gave the opening remarks. So thank you, Mr. Mitchell. That was really nice. Council of Islamic Organization of Greater Chicago is a 501(c) organization that is committed to disseminating accurate and relevant information to our community members so that they are better informed. It's a federation of 64 Muslim-based organizations across the Chicagoland and has a robust membership that brings together over 400,000 Muslim Americans in the Greater Chicago region, and now increasingly all of Illinois. Through its member organization, CIOGC assumes a greater responsibility in the civic space. In addition to the work that was just shared by Mr. Mitchell, this year, we have spearheaded and taken an initiative of hosting monthly town hall meetings. The goal of this town hall series is to conduct regular, consistent meetings of the local and regional representatives with their respective constituency. With the local elections around the corner, we would like to take this opportunity to emphasize on how important it is to be civically engaged and to be involved in your local government. Local elections are important because it directly impacts you. It has the most influence onto your day-to-day life. It influences and decides what's important to your community. It decides for you, for your parks, your school, your library, your town infrastructure, your recycling needs, your drinking water, and so much more. It helps you create the change that is transferable on a federal level. It shows that you care for your community, so you have to vote this local election. Every year during elections, CIOGC has been hosting candidates forums. These forums were hosted to help our community make informed decisions. However, once the elections are over, most of us tend to go about our daily lives, and somehow we tend to lose touch with our elected officials, whom we elected with our powerful vote. With these monthly town hall meetings, our goal is to bring your representative in direct connection with you. We are hoping through these regular monthly town hall meetings, we will learn more about our elected officials' agenda at their office. We like to know what programs and activities are ongoing at our elected officials' offices, in addition to the legislative agendas that they are working on. We also believe these town hall meetings would help us as a community to bring our issues and challenges to our representatives so they can understand our struggles and be familiar with our concerns. With all this being said, I now like to introduce our esteemed guest for this month's town hall meeting. And I'm super delighted to be the moderator for this session, especially because this is my district's representative that I'm bringing on board today. It's for District 9 Congressional Representative, Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky. Before I give the podium to her, I would like to give a brief introduction of her. Even though a lot of you know her, she's been around for a while. She's worked with the Muslim community shoulder to shoulder. I would still take this opportunity to give an introduction of hers. On behalf of CIOGC, I thank her, first of all, for taking out the time from her busy schedule and being with us on a Sunday morning. Just before we started, I was telling her spring started and we could be outdoors today, but she is with us here this morning on a Sunday. And that shows her commitment and dedication to her constituency. And that is so much appreciated, Congresswoman. I have had the honor of interacting with her on multiple occasions during our interfaith and fundraising events at Muslim Community Center in Morton Grove and Skokie. She has been an ambassador of positive change for our community and has always stood up for the rights and concerns of her constituency in District 9. Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky has been a lifelong champion for working with middle-class families. She began her advocacy as a young housewife, leading into a successful campaign to require expiration dates on food products, including baby food and formula. As your Congresswoman Jan continues to organize around common sense issues at the grassroots level to make positive change in our country. In 1998, after serving 8 years in the Illinois General Assembly, Congresswoman was elected to represent Illinois 9th Congressional District. She is in her 12th term, serving in the House Democratic leadership as a senior deputy whip. She's a member of the House Democratic Steering and Policy Committee, Committee on Budget, as well as the Committee on House Energy and Commerce, where she serves as chair of the Consumer Protection and Commerce Subcommittee and as a member of the Environment and Climate Change Oversight and Investigation Subcommittees. Congresswoman has made winning affordable, quality health care for all Americans her top priority. She played a key leadership role in writing and passing the Affordable Care Act, also known as Obamacare, that finally established health care as a right and not a privilege in the United States. With all this being said, I would now very delightfully like to welcome our guest of honor for today, Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky. Please go ahead.
Oh, hi. So thank you, my dear friend, Saba. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. I am so happy to be here. And I want to thank you so much to the Council of Islamic Organizations of Greater Chicago for inviting me to participate today. And Saba, I can't think of any place I'd rather be this morning than with you. Salam alaikum. 2 months ago, we saw President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris take the oath of office and officially begin their term. They have been in the, they have brought in the most diverse and inclusive administration in the history of our nation. We see women, Black, Brown, Indigenous, Muslim, Jewish, Catholic, LGBTQ, and every kind of first generation American at every level of government right now. And excuse me one second. I lost my script here.
Oh, okay.
Okay, there we go. And in the 2 months since taking office, we have seen incredible progress made, and many of the cruel policies of the last administration are undone. The president has repealed the discriminatory Muslim ban, and we will pass the No Ban Act, which is in the Congress right now, next month. And I look forward very much to that. This will ensure that no future president can implement such a ban ever again. President Biden also repealed the dangerous visa ban that kept families apart, established a White House Gender Policy Council to advise gender equity around the world, restored the United States Refugee Admissions Program to the level of that it used to be historically, allowing many more refugees to come into the United States, rejoined the World Health Organization and the Paris Climate Accord. And so now we are once again part of the rest of the world. And with the House and Senate now in Democratic control, we are advancing many important policy demands that the American people are putting forth. Earlier this month, the House passed H.R. 1, the For the People Act. And this legislation is the most far-reaching and comprehensive set of democracy reforms of our time, and the most revolutionary voting rights legislation in decades. And Saba, you mentioned the importance of voting, and this will make it easier. H.R. 1 would protect and advance our democracy by returning power to all the people, not just the wealthy or white voters and corporate interests. It would make it safer and easier for our community to, our communities of color, senior citizens, and people with disabilities. It would make it easier for them to vote. It would transform our democracy by making it fairer, stronger, and more inclusive by ending the domination of big money in politics, implementing tougher ethics laws across all the branches of government, and by ending extreme partisanship and gerrymandering of our districts. I'm working with my colleagues to ensure that this bill passes the Senate, it passed the House, as I said, and that it gets signed into law. It is essential that H.R. 1 becomes law, especially in light of the Republicans accelerating their efforts to disenfranchise voters. Last year, we saw Republican officials fight to restrict access to the ballot box amid a raging pandemic. We saw the former president of the United States spewing baseless and racist claims of voter fraud and election irregularities, even going so far as to incite, as you saw, a violent attack on our Capitol to overturn the free, fair, and secure 2020 presidential election. Just a few weeks ago, we saw a Republican attorney argue in front of the Supreme Court that Arizona's voting restrictions should be upheld, because without them, he said, this is unbelievable, that Republicans would be at a competitive disadvantage relative to Democrats, unquote. And today we see Republican leaders making efforts across the country to restrict voting rights at the state level, with over 250 bills already introduced across 33 states to limit voting access. I'm so proud to say that in Illinois, it's really just the opposite. We have passed bills that actually make it easier to vote. But the bills that have been passed in some states would eliminate Sunday voting. Now, why do you think they might try to eliminate Sunday voting? It's because it is most used by the Black church to get, quote, souls to the polls, going from church getting in buses or walking over to vote. So they're going to instead eliminate Sunday voting, cut mail voting access, impose strict voter ID requirements, limit pro-voter registration policies, and to enable more egregious voting roll purges, taking names off of the rolls. HR 1 will stop these acts, these attacks on democracy, and it'll stop them in their tracks. And I will keep working to push this bill and other voter protection bills forward. The House also passed HR 1280, the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act this month. This critical policy reform bill came to fruition after we watched 8 minutes and 46 seconds of George Floyd being murdered at the hand of a police officer. The whole world watched it in horror. The American people have had enough of the harassment, the violence, the killing of our Black and brown brothers and sisters. This bill was actually not even on the agenda until we saw millions of people across the country, and actually even across the world, peacefully protest. And I am proud that Congress listened to these demands and swiftly passed this comprehensive legislation. I want to tell you, this is proof that ordinary people gathering together, making demands, can change the agenda. It's a victory. And the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act would ban chokeholds, to hold people down, no-knock warrants at the federal level, and prevent the transfer of military-grade equipment to states and local law enforcement, which happened under the Trump administration. It also reforms what we call qualified immunity, so that individuals can have their day in court and recover damages when police violate their constitutional rights. Under the qualified immunity, many times the police actually say they cannot be prosecuted, and that's been upheld in court. So we have to have some reform. And it establishes a new task force within the Justice Department to coordinate the investigation, prosecution, and enforcement efforts across the federal, state, and local government in police misconduct cases. And finally, I would like to talk about a couple of my priorities that I'm focusing on in the Energy and Commerce Committee's Consumer Protection Committee, which Saba pointed out that I am the chair of that subcommittee. Over the last year, we have seen an increase in hate, conspiracy theories, violent rhetoric, and extremism online. We have seen that big tech has helped divide our country and has stoked even genocide in other places. And let me just point out that that was including in the Rohingya genocide in Myanmar in the early days, that the conversations on Facebook actually made it easier for people to coordinate against the Rohingya. And you know that I'm proud that in our district, we have the largest concentration of the Rohingya people on Devon Avenue. There is the Rohingya Cultural Center. So, we should pay attention to what's going on there. We saw firsthand the consequences of online extremism and rampant misinformation in the United States on January 6th. We saw white supremacists and violent extremists use social media to plan and execute the attack on the Capitol with the goal of assassinating members of Congress and stopping the Electoral College vote being counted. This Congress, I will use my position as chair of the Consumer Protection and Commerce Committee Subcommittee to combat the spread of violent extremism and white supremacy online, especially through social media. Earlier this month, I sent a letter to the CEO of Google to express my horror over the growing threat of extremist content propagating on YouTube. They own YouTube, and to demand answers on the from the on the company's policing and enforcement of the effort to combat extremism and protect viewers. And next week, my subcommittee is holding a hearing on social media's role in promoting extremism and misinformation. I'm looking forward to meeting with Mark Zuckerberg, who will be on that panel. And I am committed to ensuring that big tech is responsible for its consumers' safety and that its algorithms are not used to spread and amplify hate speech, incitement, and violent extremism and discrimination. I am certain that together, with the support of advocacy groups, different organizations like CIOGC, that we will achieve meaningful progress for our democracy and institutions, and foster a safe, inclusive, and equal society for all. I hope that many of you have received a check or a deposit in your bank account for $1,400, just one of the elements of the American Rescue Plan that is going to help a lot of people who have been suffering. And I was so thrilled, really, that this comprehensive bill to address the needs of the American people passed the House and the Senate, and was signed by the President of the United States of America. It's a new day, and I thank you for your advocacy and everything that you do for our community. And I want to encourage everyone here to reach out to my office if you need any kind of assistance or help, or want to make a comment. Our partnership is very special to me. Thank you so very much. I yield back.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. That was very insightful. We appreciate everything that you're doing for us and coming back in front of us and telling us what you are working on. And pretty much this town hall series, that's the whole purpose of doing this town hall meetings, so that we can hear directly from our representatives and at the same time share our concerns with you. So it was very nice to hear what you said. I also wanted to ask you if there are any programs that you're doing at your office. I know at one time you used to do winter internships and summer internships. The neighborhood program, are those programs still going on? Is there any program where if our community would like to come and participate or be a part of it, would you help us know more about those kind of programs that you have?
Well, one of my missions is definitely to involve the community and especially young people who have taken such great leadership roles on so many different issues. So believe it or not, during COVID, we have had not as robust as we've had before when we can all meet together, but we do have an internship program. And maybe you can share in the chat a number that people can call. 773-506-7100 is the office number, and we will return those calls. But we really definitely want to continue with that, and hopefully, as the virus winds down, that we'll be able to do more in person with our. But actually, the program has been both on the congressional side, but I just want to say also on the political side. And we've had a really strong internship program on the political side too, getting involved in elections and issues.
Great. In March being the month of women history, I do recall some of the power lunches that you used to do which happened last year. I think it was a virtual event due to COVID. Is your office planning on doing something this year as well?
Yes, I wish I could tell you the dates. It's toward the end of May. We'll get the information out. We are, and we're going to, unfortunately, we are still going to do it virtually. It's the next year that I hope that we can all crowd into one or two hotel rooms and all be together and enjoy the spring and the warm weather, and celebrate just women power.
Yes, yes, women power. Great. Well, very nice.
By the way, a lot of men come too, and I appreciate their presence there. I love that.
I see Brother Mitchell is laughing on the screen. So yes, we love seeing them there too. I'm looking forward to that. So thank you so much. Now, I know you discussed some of the bills that your office is working on, and one of them was the No Ban Act. I remember when Muslim Community Center, we had an event where you came and you spoke, and it was an amazing event where you came and you showed support for the Muslim community. So
it's 12 o'clock.
Pardon me, that's my computer's clock. So I appreciate you doing that. Just in those same lines, there was a question that came up is, what are the prospects for this bill being passed in the Senate and eventually signed into law? So in July 2020, when I think the bill 1123 was passed, what's the prospectus of this bill to be signed as a law?
So that's a big question. First of all, know though that the ban is already gone because of the executive order of the President of the United States. But we do want to have it into law because we don't want any future president to be able to do anything of the sort. I think some of us remember being out at the airport right after Donald Trump was elected to protest this ban that he did in one of the first days of his administration. And we ended it in one of the first of the Biden administration. Okay, so it's a little bit of a longer answer. We were able to pass the American Rescue Act in a process that only required 51 votes to get it passed, a majority, which is a good thing. Unfortunately, the Senate has adopted a procedure that it often takes 60 votes, a supermajority, in order to pass a bill. Now, there is now discussion about how undemocratic really that is, that the majority ought to be able to decide far more pieces of legislation than just a couple a year under sequestration. So right now, or reconciliation rather. So right now, there is definitely conversation going on in the Senate on how to reform the filibuster so as not to allow just a requirement for 60 votes, which could put even a sensible bill like this, an anti-discrimination bill like this, that could even prevent that from passing. So we need, though, to continue to organize, 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 organize. The people that are mostly on this call are in my district. You know where I am. But we need to get people around the country to call their own members of Congress to make sure they know there is a real Muslim presence in their district that cannot be ignored. And I hate to tell you this, but it has to be the most effective is when their own constituents call. Usually don't pay too much attention to people who are outside the district. And so, it's going to really require pressure, not only in our district, but all over, and not just Illinois, but all over the country. And I'm sure nationally this could be organized.
Let me, if I may now, follow up a couple of questions we had posed to you in our invitation, and you've addressed a number of them, particularly when we say the People's Act, House Bill number 1. I think it's significant the fact that this is the first piece of legislation that's coming in this session that has the number 1. At least it identifies the importance to you as members of Congress. But
by the way, S2 is the companion bill in the Senate. So it's now bipartisan.
Great. But here's, I guess, the concern we have, and unfortunately, well, not unfortunately for us in Illinois, we don't have this problem, but nonetheless, we understand, as you said, for effective legislation to be passed, we have to have everybody throughout the United States in. And when we look at states like Georgia now that has 2 bills pending that are attempt to eliminate voting on Sunday, restricting the period for early balloting, things like that. And it's all under the banner of election integrity. How is this House bill really going to address those concerns? And once again, what role do you see even in Illinois, can serve to further push this agenda forward?
Okay, so we passed it in the House, but I was very cheered by hearing Chuck Schumer in talking about S2, which is the same as our For the People, the voting rights bill, in the Senate, say failure is not an option. I'm thinking Chuck Schumer has something in mind when it comes to the filibuster to make sure that bills that have to do with not only election integrity, but protecting our democracy, and trying to alter the rules that would require 60 votes. So I feel optimistic. I think in terms of Illinois, where we have some of the best voting rights laws, people have to think about where their families live, where their friends are around the country, and try and get people engaged to be contacting their senators. It really does make a difference. And so I'm much more upbeat than I was when we first passed HR 1 in the House to stop this voter suppression, when Chuck Schumer said failure is not an option.
Let me ask one follow-up question, because it kind of was raised in in terms of your personal initiatives in terms of holding big tech accountable. Mm-hmm. And that's once again the ongoing complaint of money in impacting elections. We witnessed how money was used to even spread all these false statements about the integrity of the elections. What can be, or what is Congress proposed to address this ongoing problem?
So we are tired of the tech companies saying, oh, we're going to do better. Oh, we're sorry. Oh, that was a mistake. We have a plan. We're going to hire more people. We are now looking at what are the bills that we can turn into law that will prohibit certain activities by big tech. you know, in the real world, you cannot yell fire in a crowded theater. That's against the law. And we have to make certain activities the kind of extremism that is perpetrated, the kind of hate that is developed. And, you know, you can even go online and find out how to build guns and all kinds of things. You know, we have to make the internet safe now for people, particularly our children, who are also often victimized. They're prone to something flashy, you know, to follow it and to watch it. And so we are very serious. We have a bill that is written already having to do with protection of children. And when we have our hearing this week with the likes of Mark Zuckerberg, we're going to say, because he has said, I think there ought to be some regulation. I'm going to say, let's hear what you say. And then we're going to get to work to pass some laws. Because, you know, they have some 3 billion people on Facebook around the world in all different languages. They extend past the borders of everything in our countries and in our world. And, you know, we have to make sure that they are not jeopardizing the health, the safe, because there's misinformation that's going out about COVID, you know, crazy things that will cure COVID that are false, and the extremism and the violence. We're going to end it.
We appreciate that aggressive representation, particularly very critical to all communities across the United States. Well, one question I want to shift gears, if I may, and this goes on to a concern of segments within in the Muslim community in Greater Chicago and within your district, and that's for Palestinian Americans who have families on the West Bank, and it really is focusing in now. There's House Bill 2407, which is designed to address the use, bar or limit the use of funding of the Israel's military to be barred from using in the detention of children. In essence, their incarceration. Too often we find citizens, in particular children, are caught in the crosshairs of political conflict. But this, we feel, is a humanitarian concern. What is your position and how can you support this effort?
So I have been very engaged in the effort itself, not as a part of the bill, because I think the language of the bill, and I've talked to the sponsor of it, is really not, it's destined not to pass the House of Representatives. But I think something that would address the issue of the incarceration of minors, and we're talking children. We are talking about children. Now, I want to tell you something. As a Jew, proud and active Jew, I have been very, very engaged in the issue of justice for Palestinians, and have traveled in the certainly both in Gaza and the West Bank. I have spoken out strongly to make sure that we are supporting UNRWA, the agency that helps refugees and funds a lot of programs in Gaza. I have been against the occupation. I am fighting right now to make sure that Israel, who does occupy the West Bank, does everything it can to make sure that vaccines are available to Palestinians and residents of the West Bank and Gaza, which at present it's very limited, which is really not even smart because, you know, the vaccine, I mean, the virus does not recognize borders. So they may recognize borders, but The virus doesn't recognize a border. So you want to make sure that everyone in your neighborhood, and they're all in that neighborhood, we're all in that neighborhood together. So I have been very, very active in that. Just had a briefing this week from activists and UNRWA, the UN agency, about what is happening in the West Bank and Gaza. And as a Jew, I'm very concerned about that and want to see the policies of Israel be changed.
We appreciate those sentiments. And because like I said, once again, as we look at this particular bill, it's being backed by 27 different organizations, many of them faith-based, because we do see it as a moral obligation for something to do. So what would you offer in terms of a suggestion? I understand.
I want to work with my colleague who has sponsored it. There's not enough members that sponsor it that would speak to it being able to pass the House of Representatives. But I absolutely do think that we can make progress on the issue of the terrible treatment of children. And we'll continue to work on that. I've also been very active on the bulldozing of communities that goes on, and have visited some of those communities that are supposedly illegal and scheduled for demolition. I am a supporter of the state of Israel, not the government of Israel that is initiating all these activities that are so harmful to the Palestinian people. So you can count on me.
Well, we look forward to what suggestions you would have, because right now the children are still there. They're still being victimized, and we collectively have empathy for them. But we're asking and looking for what your leadership and how we can push this matter forward, particularly you being a Jew. Your voice speaks higher than many others on this. And we look forward to, from your legislative director, share your plan. We will get our community behind you.
Okay.
We have faith and confidence in you, and we hope that we can see that forthcoming.
I promise I will do that. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, the other thing that touches my heart, and you know, when you made reference to George Floyd, it was hurtful for me when you saw that police officer have his hands in his pocket under no threat whatsoever, and in essence choked him to death. Police reform historically, or police practices rather, historically has been a serious problem in the African American community and other communities of color, where we have a mentality of the law enforcement, instead of protecting, they're enforcing. The increased militarization of police tactics. Now, we spoke about the George Floyd Police Act and having those items that you mentioned, but like I said, what do you see as a role that the federal government it can further play? Because I know, once again, many people don't understand the breakdown in jurisdiction, what the federal government can and can't do. Like you say, with the no knock warrants, that's good for federal law enforcement, but we're dealing with it on the state level, or in our local municipalities. And I guess I'm kind of giving more editorial comment than giving a question, but I am getting there. The other aspect of it is really an element that you pointed to is funding. That it's not, to me, it's more than limiting funding for buying bigger types of weapons, but how do you see using funding as a vehicle to be a catalyst for change?
First of all, in Illinois, we just passed, the legislature did pass a very good bill. So about, I think it was about police violence, but I know it dealt with all kinds of discrimination. So, and law enforcement. So I think we need to, in Washington, help to reimagine what policing needs to look like. I was watching on, I think it was MSNBC this morning, where one of the commentators said, you know, they don't send an armed policeman to your, or woman to your house if you are behind in your taxes and they're trying to collect taxes. Why do we have to have armed police that are giving out tickets for to drivers? Why, when there is a call and someone needs some kind of mental health, are we sending a police officer armed and ready to fire? Now, so reimagining policing means, I think, talking about how we fund other functions that are needed in the community, but don't have to be handled by armed police officers who may or may not have the training that they need. And why would they be expected to in various areas? The reason I'm optimistic about this is when we saw the protests that followed George Floyd's murder, and by the way, they haven't stopped. We've seen so many since then. You know, it just seems to keep on going. It wasn't just people of color. I mean, white people were out there, and then people of all colors were out there marching and protesting and demanding change, because we are talking about systemic racism that's gone on forever and ever, and expressing itself in so many different ways. But really, policing is such an important one. Jonathan K. Park was the host of this show I was watching, and he said, you know, to an African American, to a Black young man, driving creates a lot of anxiety and fear. Just the fact of it, that you may get yourself in trouble. And of course, walking in just taking a walk in your own neighborhood sometimes can end up in murder. So it's on the agenda now. This is a good thing. It's on the agenda at the federal levels, at the state levels, but this is definitely not going away. And I think that the Justice and Policing Act is just a very small, actually, first step in that we want to take. But I think the conversation needs to go well beyond that. What is appropriate for the police force, for the armed police to engage in, and what is not?
Mr. Mitchell and Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, we are about 12:20 now. I'm going to open the podium for people to ask their questions. I have a series of questions that are lined up. If you may allow, I could start reading out the questions for you, Congresswoman.
Of course, and I'll be shorter in my answers so I can get more.
Okay. The very first question that I have here on the screen is, and I'm just going to read as it says, last Tuesday night, 8 people were killed in a shooting rampage at 3 spas in the Atlanta area. 6 of the victims were Asian women. This tragedy comes in the midst of a rapid rise in anti-Asian violent attacks since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, the majority of which have targeted women. Close to 3,800 incidents were reported from March 19, 2020 to February 28, 2021 against the Asian Americans. Congresswoman, what is your plan to address such hate crimes, and how can we have a long-term solution to this kind of an issue?
So KPAC, which is our organization within the Congress of members, I'm a member too. I mean, anybody can be a member, but it's about our Asian American Asian Pacific members. And they're, of course, really focused right now on this issue. We've never, well, I shouldn't say we've never seen a spike like this. Let's remember that Japanese Americans were incarcerated in camps during World War II. So it's completely unacceptable. We have to address this, and it's moved around from, you know, Jews and Muslims, and I mean, people have been targeted at different, it's the end of, we have to fight against all of this, which is now particularly on the minds of Asian Americans. And we've heard members of Congress say really terrible things like, you know, we know how to take care of things. We find a big tall tree. This member was talking about lynching. It's shocking. So we have to push back. They may have, KPAC has been having lots of educational meetings, and now we have to come up with some legislation to address this.
Great, thank you. The other question that I have is, how could we convince the Senate to overturn the filibuster so we can pass important legislation such as the immigration reform and raise the minimum wage?
Yeah, you know, some of you may know who Reverend Barber is, Moral Mondays. He's a big leader in the Black community. He said during slavery, the minimum wage was $0. And in all these years, where have we gotten at the federal level? $7.25. You can't live on it. We have to raise the minimum wage. It's been over a decade since it's been raised. You can't live on it at all. And the first part, oh, how we're not going to be able to convince. I mean, we have to convince some of the senators, and there's talk, for example, about requiring the old-fashioned kind of filibuster where you have to be on the floor and you have to be talking the whole time. You can't just say, we invoke the, you know, filibuster. So we're looking at all different kinds of ways to do it.
Okay, great, thank you. Someone typed, thank you so much, CIOGC and Jan Schakowsky, for taking the time to speak to us. Internet safety, especially for our children, is a huge issue. So that was not a question, it was just a comment. The next question that I have is, Indian government, especially the Prime Minister, is adopting extreme violent tactics to promote the Hindu ideological agenda and victimizing the Muslim, Christian, and poor downtrodden, low-caste Hindus. What can we, as another great democracy, do to stop this brutal regime and the hate they promote?
There is a resolution before the Chicago City Council. I understand it's been kind of watered down, but I support that resolution that would condemn the discrimination against Muslims. The BJP party under Prime Minister Modi is pretty much a Hindu nationalist party, which is a shame because India is very, very diverse in every possible way, including religion. And so it's not just Muslims, although it certainly has been, I think, most extreme that way. And I support the Chicago resolution and condemn what the Prime Minister is doing right now, what Modi is promoting right now. It's very bad. I got a call also from a Sikh friend of mine who says that the farmers, Sikhs, a lot of them are farmers, have also been the victims of this discrimination. So, you know, we are in a better position as the United States of America these days to promote diversity, democracy, and just treating people better. And we need to speak out about that.
We for sure do. Thank you so much. The next question is, we are hearing a lot about refugee flights being canceled. How can we pressure the Biden administration to sign the executive order to start bringing in the refugees? I know we need to build up infrastructure, but we can still resettle folks easily in this fiscal year.
Well, I'm going to have to look more into that. I was really not aware that flights have been canceled. Our refugee resettlement organizations, who have had little to do over the last 4 years because there was such a cutback. Now that we've raised that number, we are equipped to be bringing more refugees. I've had the privilege of welcoming some myself when that was still happening, which is, just such an amazing and rewarding experience. And so I'll find out more about flight cancellations. Thank you for bringing it up.
Mhm. And I know you did touch base on the settlements in Palestinian lands, but I do have a question here that I'm going to read out to you. What is your position on settlements in Palestinian lands, and what support can you give towards Palestinian rights to their homeland, including Jerusalem?
Well, I've certainly met with the ambassador, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, complained about. I mean, I was at one village where there was a Israeli settlement across the street. This is in the West Bank, and they wouldn't let the water pipe go to the Palestinian village that had been there, I don't know, for hundreds of years, maybe. I mean, it's just, so I've made several trips on this issue to Israel. We've done, we've passed resolutions in the Congress calling for a two-state solution so that Palestinians and Israelis can live next to each other in peace. I still think it would be the best way to go, but mostly we have to end the occupation altogether, and just keep fighting for rights. I'm on that team, and yet there's yet another election, unbelievable, 4 in a row coming up soon, and I think that Netanyahu has caused a lot of the problems, and I'll be fighting on this. I'm working to also help get us back to the agreement with the JCPOA with Iran, so that we don't have a nuclear Iran. I mean, there's so many issues there, and I hope that if you looked at my record, that you'd see that we are on the same team.
Great. 2 more questions, and then we will wrap this up. Representative Schakowsky, you are an executive board member at large of Congressional Progressive Caucus. Can you help us understand the stated purpose and goals of this Progressive Caucus?
Well, you have seen the Progressive Caucus actually win a number of victories in the American Rescue Act, making sure that we stuck to the $1,400 that went to people, and in the House at least getting the increase in the minimum wage. That's really been a primary issue of the Progressive Caucus, and I think we have a chance of winning on that. Can't have, we've been fighting for the for $15 an hour probably for almost 10 years. And that's still where we're at, and it is phased in over years. So even winning the bill for $15 an hour actually wouldn't get us there for a few years. But the Progressive Caucus is on the leading edge of a lot of the things that were included in this Rescue Act, including the extension of the uninsurance, the money for the uninsured, $30 a week has been extended through September. So anyway, we have an agenda that puts the ordinary people and not the rich ahead, or the corporate interest or the lobbyists. It's a very wide, progressive agenda. And I think that, as I said earlier, it's a new day, that people are ready now for some real change in their direction. Ordinary people are.
Thank you so much. And the last question for this session is, thanks to the pandemic and the much needed relief bills, we as a country will end up creating a huge debt. How do you see as an economic solution to manage that, so it does not just getting passed on to the future generations?
Well, let me talk about future generations. Right now, the bill that we passed, the Rescue Act, Columbia University said it will reduce child poverty by half. So I think if we're going to worry about future generations, we better worry about the kids right now, and the families who can't afford to have education. And you should know too, that some of the most esteemed economists agree that what we have to do now is put money in people's pockets, that that's the way we actually stimulate the economy. When people have money, they can go out and shop, they can go to restaurants, they can make major purposes, they can pay their rent, and maybe at some point buy a house. The economy is stagnated right now because the vast majority of people don't have enough money. And in 2017, the Republicans passed a tax relief bill that 83% went to the top 1%. What do they do with their money? I mean, they don't have to go out and spend it. They just accumulate it. And so I'm very excited about the route that we're taking right now to build, through lifting up the poor and the middle class, an economy that will be healthy and prosperous because it is driven by ordinary people. And I think we're gonna see that the economy is going to do better under that philosophy than the idea of austerity, or that we have to cut back, or that we're spending too much money on helping people. I don't think that's right. I think we're on the right track now.
Great. So that concludes our question and answer session, Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky. I appreciate your time in this session. I'm going to request Sana to move on to the next slide. This was a Congressional Townhall Series for this month, March. Our next month, we have invited Congressman from 6th Congressional District, Sean Casten. So I would encourage all our audience to be present at that session too. Before we conclude this, I like to thank Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky for all the time that she's given here with us, spend the time that she spent with us. There were tough questions.
If I could just say congratulations to you. I hope this was useful. It was very useful for me to get feedback, to hear from you, and will stimulate things that I will do now. So thank you. This has been wonderful.
Thank you so much. Do you have any particular message for the community? Especially, we would like to hear from you how the community can get involved more and can be more civically engaged, because that's something that we see. It's hard. It's hard for people with their busy lives, and we all have errands to run, ends to meet, and sometimes getting civically involved and engaged is not the first thing in the list. So if you have any message for the community on how they could be more proactive when it comes to local elections or anything that involves their community betterment, that would be great.
Thank you. Well, certainly vote. The suburbs are having votes right now. You know, the early voting, I think, begins tomorrow in a bunch of suburban areas. And so take a look at those. And also consider running for those offices, for school board, for library board, on the city council in your community. I mean, if you are concerned about something, or you feel like you want to take more of a leadership role, then you should consider running. And I also want to reemphasize that we do have an internship program, 773-506-7100. And we'd love to have more young people involved, both on the political and the congressional end. So I am very encouraged that you are doing such a good job encouraging people to get more involved. You can see how your life can be better or worse because who are the people that represent you. And while I think we've taken a turn for the better, we can never count on anything. We have to be vigilant when it comes to protecting our democracy at the local, state, federal, county, township level.
Thank you so much. And now I'm going to have Mr. Abdullah Mitchell to make the final concluding remarks. We do hope to see you again sometime soon, Congresswoman. Hopefully this COVID is all going to end soon and we would run into each other in some fundraiser dinner or at your office or somewhere. So thank you for the amazing job that you're doing for the community. It's very greatly appreciated. Thank you.
It's an honor. Thank you.
Brother Mitchell.
Yes, and once again, I would reiterate our gratitude for you joining us. I mean, it begins to set a new tone for how we as citizens need to engage with our elected officials and to hear honest, straightforward feedback to help us, in essence, assume a greater civic responsibility for making our community better. And on behalf of the board of the Council of Islamic Organizations of Greater Chicago, its staff, and our and membership throughout Greater Chicago, and more importantly in the 9th District, Congressional District, we thank you and for joining us this morning, and may you have a blessed day. Thank you. Peace. Assalamu alaikum to everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Peace be on you.